بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Last week we talked about the Prophet ﷺ meeting the different delegations from different parts of the Arabian Peninsula who had come to perform the Hajj. And we said that Hajj existed from the time of Prophet Ibrahim and Ismail alayhi salam. Of course, they changed it a bit and they made it into they included some pagan rituals in there, but nonetheless, Hajj was not something that was alien to them. So they did used to perform Hajj, and the Prophet ﷺ, he used to take advantage of that time in order to call those people. So he would call those people towards Islam. We mentioned that he came upon a very small tribe, relatively small. There was only 9 people. It doesn't mean that there was only 9 people in that tribe, but there was only 9 Hujjaj in that tent, or rather 12. And the Prophet ﷺ, he invited them, and they accepted Islam, and then they promised to come back next year. Next year they came, and the Prophet ﷺ took the pledge of oath from them, and they went back with an ambassador, someone to teach them about Islam, and that was Mus'ab ibn Umair. And we will hear about him some more when we migrate in our Seerah with the Prophet ﷺ to Medina. Then they came back the 3rd year, and that was the 13th year of the da'wah. So they came back the next year, the 13th year of the da'wah. Some scholars said it was the 12th year, but it's not too much of a difference in time frame. They came back, and this time there was about 75 people. And so the first bay'ah, the first pledge or the first covenant, the first oath that the Prophet ﷺ took from them was also called a woman's bay'ah. And what that means is that it didn't involve any oath or any pledge, any commitment to do any war against anyone, especially the Quraysh. So that's why it was called the woman's bay'ah. However, the second was a commitment of both protection and war. Okay, so the first one was just religious duties. Don't worship anyone besides Allah. Do not kill. Do not kill anyone. Do not commit zina, and so on and so forth. The second one was that plus a commitment to protect the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims, and also a commitment of war. Okay? So the Prophet ﷺ took this from the second batch, which also included some from the first 2 batches. So the Prophet ﷺ, he took this covenant and this oath from them. And remember, we mentioned that one of them stood up. He held the hand of the Prophet ﷺ. His name was As'ad ibn Zurara. He stood up and he told the people, don't be hasty. Don't rush into this. We have traveled all this way knowing that he is the Prophet of Allah, but realize that this covenant is not like the first one, because the first one was just an oath to keep their religious duties. Because to this one, if you say yes, then you are going to lose your family, your children, make your women widows, and so on. So if you are ready to do this, take the oath, or otherwise, don't. Excuse yourself. So As'ad, he's thinking about the ramification that if any one of them or all of them were to default and not live up to that pledge. Because the pledge in Islam, it is a very, very serious matter. So when he said this to the people were so ready to give their oath of allegiance, their pledge to the Prophet ﷺ. They said, "You've spoken enough. Take off your hand, give us his hand so we can pledge him and give him our bay'ah, our pledge." And we also mentioned how Abbas radiallahu anhu, at the time he wasn't a Muslim, he was standing there and he was watching all of this. And because he was a pagan, he wasn't seeing it from the eye or from the perspective of a Muslim. So he kept on seeing it from the perspective of tribalism and from the perspective of paganism, basically. Because he's like, I don't know any one of these. There's no elders from them. They're all youngsters. What does that mean? That means you can't depend on youngsters. Elders are the people who have loyalty. Youngsters don't have loyalty. How can these youngsters who don't have a leader amongst them, who don't have elders, and we mentioned why they don't have elders, because in the battle of Bu'ath, which raged for 10 years, it annihilated and wiped out all of their elders. So he's seeing it from that perspective, and he said, how can these youngsters protect you? Why would they? Right? So he's seeing it. But of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from his wisdom, he chose the people of Yathrib. He chose the people from Aus and Khazraj, that they would go ahead and be the Ansar to the Muhajirin, be the Ansar of the Muslims and of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, there's another. So after he took the pledge from them, from every single one of them, including the woman, some of the women that were present there, he appointed 12 of them to be the chiefs from amongst them, 9 from Khazraj and 3 from Aus. And he said, you are like the apostles of Isa, and you are responsible for the community, whereas I am responsible for the whole Muslim ummah. Meaning, so the Prophet ﷺ, he chose them so that way they can go ahead and temporarily be responsible for the community over there, because anytime you have a Muslim community, you must have a leader. You must have one ultimate leader, and that was the Prophet ﷺ. But then you have what you call representatives or ministers, whatever contemporary words there are to describe them. We'll go ahead and use the generic title, the generic word, which is leaders. So the Prophet ﷺ, he appointed 12 chiefs, and he said, because Isa alayhi salam, he also had 12 apostles. So he said, you are like the apostles of Isa, and you are responsible for the community. Now, a very strange thing happened. As this was going on, in the middle of the night, remember, this is the last day of Hajj. This is the last day of Hajj. So it is narrated that when this oath was going on, they heard a loud voice in the valley of Medina. Give me 1 minute. They heard a very loud voice in the valley of Medina. And this strange voice called out, O people sleeping in the tents, meaning the Hujjaj, do you not know a group of blameworthy people having gathered together with the Sabit to wage war against you? Now, Sabit were people that the Arabs knew, were individuals that the Arabs said that, were individuals that the Arabs called, rather, that these are people who abandoned the religion of their forefathers and paganism, and they became monotheists. So they were called Sabi'. And in the Quran, it is mentioned. In the Quran, this term Sabi'un is also mentioned in the Quran, but in a different perspective. So who are the Sabi'un? this is a group that goes back even way back, even before Christianity. Some of them even claim that they have a book from the son of Nuh alayhi salam. That they have a book from the son of Nuh alayhi salam. And they have a book from that time. And these people, you know, they do certain things, such as they don't eat pork. They take ghusl after sexual impurity. Okay? So they do certain things that are very much in line with the prophetic, the overall prophetic guidance and mannerism. They still exist, but they're very, very small in number. And where do they exist? Well, they exist in the cradle of civilization, and that is Iraq. Iraq is where all the people, Mesopotamia, right? That is where Babylon, that is where civilizations, all the different civilizations emerged. And they went to different parts of the world. So they still remain there. There's only about 30, 40, 50,000 people in a place called al-Madaiyun. And you can go ahead and Google that. So this voice called out saying, they are waging against you under the Sabi. And here he was referring, the strange voice was referring to the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ, he recognized it. And he said, this is the shaitan of Aqaba. Remember, that is the place I showed you last week. That is the place where the pledge, the oath took place. So he recognized that this is shaitan. He said, I swear by Allah, I will deal with you. So the shaitan, he felt so overwhelmed that something is going to happen. Islam is going to grow now, is going to spread, and he is trying everything he can. So he screams out to the humans and to the people of the tents. And this shows how desperate he is trying to stop it. That, you know, he will do anything, but yet he can't do anything. Does that make sense? He wants to do everything, but he can't. Right? That's how weak he is. All he can do is whisper. But at that time, it was a voice that came and yelled out to the people. And if we were to truly recognize how weak shaitan is, we would be able to deal with him accordingly, with the whispers, with the waswasa, with these tricks that he uses. And it's the same tricks, by the way. Throughout time, he uses the same tricks. It's not like, you know, he's living in the 21st century and now he's come up with some technological tricks. It's the same tricks that he uses. Of course, he uses it in different ways. Like the trick of wealth. Back then it was gold. Back then it was, you know, animals and so on. Now it's in a different form. All right. So this is how weak shaitan is. He can't do anything. He is so scared of Islam growing and Muslims, and that will defeat his pledge that he made to Allah, that he is going to لَأُغْوِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. He is going to deceive and lead astray everyone. So he goes and he shouts. And subhanallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in the Quran that inna shaytana lakum aduwwun fattakhiduhu aduwwa. Verily shaitan, he is your enemy, so take him as such. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he recognized and he knew that this was shaitan, and he knew that he was Iblis and he was the leader of them. And just a side note, this also shows that where do the shaitans and the jinns live? They live in the valleys. They live in deserted areas. They live in the jungles, in the wilderness, where people don't really normally visit. That's where they abide. That's where they reside. That's where they live. Okay? Of course, they also live with human beings, those human beings that, for example, enter the house without saying Bismillah, they eat without Bismillah, and so on. So, but generally speaking, that is where they live. So, for example, if all of us Muslims, we enter our houses by saying Bismillah and we start eating with Bismillah, you think Shaitan will be entering? No. Then where is he gonna go? He's gonna go to where normally they are. So the Ansar, when they heard this, when the people of the tent, when they heard this, they told the Prophet ﷺ, shouldn't we launch an attack right now? We are 70 strong, 75. We have our swords with us, and they are unarmed. So you might be wondering why they have swords, because they would allow people to, in Hajj, to bring only one sword, not like a whole cavalry, or not like a whole, cache of weaponry. So they would allow for defensive, for hunting. So they had. So they said, look, those other people, they don't have it. We are ready to go ahead and finish this once and for all. And so this is how ready they were to go ahead and fulfill their oath. But the Prophet ﷺ, he just said, I have not been commanded to do so. And this shows you that the Prophet ﷺ, he only does what he is commanded. He only says what he is inspired to him. So they dropped that plan. Now the next morning, some of the Quraysh, they came and they went to each camp, because they also heard it. They're in Hajj. And they said, do you know of anybody that met with this man, meaning with the Prophet ﷺ? Because they heard this. So they would go and ask every single tent, did you see anything? Do you know who met with these people? Because they're trying to follow. Until when they went to the tents of these Ansar, the Khazraj and the Aus tents. And the Quraysh said, who amongst you has met with this man? And the Muslims, they remained quiet. But the pagans, the mushrikeen from amongst them, they said that no one has met them. The Muslims remained silent, but the pagans, they said, we didn't meet with them. And from that perspective, they were right. They didn't meet with the Prophet ﷺ. But the Muslims, they remained silent. And the pagans, they didn't know that these Muslims that these tribesmen from amongst them became Muslims, and they gave that oath. Does that make sense? So they remained silent while they allowed the pagans from amongst them to say that they haven't met them. And so the pagans of the Khazraj were the ones that spoke, and when they said that, the Quraysh were content with their answer, and the matter was resolved. Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ, and this tells us again how much the Ansar were ready, because remember I said last week that the Ansar were people that had so much integrity and jealousy, maybe not jealousy, but integrity, and this sense of honor for the Prophet ﷺ. They were independent people. They were not from Quraysh. They said, look, we believed in the Prophet. For how long are we going to allow the people of Quraysh, his people, or anyone, to bother him and to persecute him? For how long? That is a sense of honor. That's a sense of ghira, okay, that they had for the Prophet ﷺ. And they were ready to act upon that when they heard that voice. And they were ready to defend and even do this offensively, even though the Prophet ﷺ at the time he just said to protect him, right? So defense. But they were ready to go that extra mile and do an offensive. And that's why we see that the Prophet ﷺ, he loved the Ansar so much. And we mentioned how after the conquest of Makkah, if it was not for his if it was not for the fact that he promised the Ansar that he's going to be with them, he would have stayed in Makkah. And he also said after the conquest of Makkah, if it was not for the Hijrah, I would be a man of the Ansar. But because it was a Hijrah, I had to make Hijrah, so I am from amongst the Muhajirin. But if there was no Hijrah, then I would be from amongst the Ansar, the helpers, those who help the religion of Islam. And he said, if the Ansar went in one direction, in one valley, they took one road, and all of mankind took another road, I will follow the Ansar. And the Prophet ﷺ, he also said, loving the Ansar is a part of Iman. And in another hadith, he says, hating the Ansar is a sign of hypocrisy, nifaq. So not only should we be loving all of the Sahaba, but the Muhajirin and the Ansar in particular. So we love all of the Sahaba, but the Ansar in particular because of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And after one of the battles, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he made dua for them. He said, "Oh Allah, forgive the Ansar and their children." And that was specific dua. He singled them out and their children. And we mentioned also how that in all of the battles, because the Prophet ﷺ, he took that oath of protection that they're going to defend him and the Muslims. So when, and we will see this many times, and we will give many names and many examples when we go to those battles, by far he would go ahead and choose more of the Ansar to participate in the battles than he would from the Muhajirin. So you could say it was a 4-to-1 ratio, 75% of the Ansar, 25% in some instances. Yet when it came to distributing the shares, the what is it called, the spoils of war, who would he give it to? He would give it to the Muhajirin more than he would give it to the Ansar. And so some amongst them, the much younger ones, right? Maybe it could be said those who were not present in amongst the 75 people. So some of them, we don't know who, but some of them said, look, our line, our necks are on the line. Our blood is being shed. More of us die than from the Muhajirin, and yet he prefers the Muhajirin over us. And so when the Prophet ﷺ, he heard of this, he calmed them down. He told them that, what do you think? That these people, they go back home with dirham, with dinar, with gold and silver, and these animals, these sheep, and you go back home with the Prophet of Allah. And so all of them, they were content. They started to cry and apologize and beg the forgiveness of the Prophet ﷺ, that some youth from amongst them would even dare to say such a thing. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he loved the Ansar so much, and he would always make dua for them and talk very highly of them. Now coming back to the Prophet ﷺ, some of the women that took an oath right? We mentioned there was 2 or 3 of the women that took an oath. These 2 women or these 3 women that gave an oath gave a promise of protection, just like the men did. And they lived up to that. One of them, actually, why don't I give you guys that as a homework? Why don't I give you guys that as a homework to go ahead and find who were the 2 women that you can read in different sources, but the 2 sources that I've given you guys so far is when the moon split. And if you can't find it there, then read the more detailed version of it, which is Al-Rahiq, the sealed nectar. If you can't find it there, then look at Martin Ling's biography of Muhammad. You could find all of these online, PDF. And then if you still can't, then you can go ahead and Google it. Okay? But don't search for it right away on Google, because I would like for you guys to read just a little bit before and a little bit after this and find out who were these people. One of them had 12 wounds in the battle of Uhud. She took part in the oath of Aqaba and even in the oath of Ridwan, which was much later on. Her son became a general under Khalid ibn Walid, and he was martyred in front of her eyes by Musaylama al-Khattab. And she participated in many wars against the Romans, and her hand was cut off and during the battle. So she lived up to that oath to the Prophet Already. Okay. Now, at the Treaty of Aqaba, the Prophet ﷺ, he told the Muslims, and he said, Allah has shown me the land you shall migrate to. It's a land of date palms between 2 volcanic plains. And that is true because, and we showed this, maybe we can show this again, but Medina has several volcanoes. Okay? It is a place called Labba, very similar to lava. Let me see how I can share. Okay. Now remember, I showed you guys these volcanoes before in one of the... So these are the famous volcanoes right outside, and Medina is fortified. We will mention why the Prophet ﷺ, he chose Medina. So Medina has all of these volcanoes around it, and sometimes it erupts, and there's it erupts and it comes out, and that's what you see this right here. These are all the volcanoes right here, and these are all, you know, around Medina, outside of Medina, in the outskirts of Medina. There's another one where it shows a clear picture, but you guys get the idea of that Medina is surrounded by volcanoes, and it is fortified from 2 different directions, from the east and the west. From the east and the west. The north is fortified by date palm trees. So now the Prophet ﷺ, you could say that he chose Medina, or rather Medina was chosen for him because of his fortification, because it is protected. You cannot really expect an army to travel through lava and volcanoes that is ready to erupt or can erupt anytime. Okay? So east and west is protected, and we will also see this in the Battle of the Trench. And the Battle of the Trench is also called the Battle of the Confederacy. The Confederacy. Now, so the only exposed part of Medina to an attack is the south, because there is no date palm trees, there is no gardens, there's no these date palm trees. Because if you have date palm trees right next to each other, how are you going to have these, these horses and these men and these wagons walk, travel through it? So you find that Medina is pretty much fortified, and the Prophet ﷺ only had to worry about that. So he said to the Sahaba that I have been shown a vision, or I have been shown the land where we will all migrate to. And it's the land of the date palms between two volcanic plains. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he either had Khaybar in mind or Medina, but it was made apparent from the Aqaba, from these people that came and gave him the oath. So now, after this, the Prophet ﷺ, he started preparing and giving permission to the Muslims to secretly migrate or start migrating to Medina. Why would he allow this? Or rather, why would he tell them to secretly migrate? Because, of course, we mentioned during the first migration, which was to Abyssinia, the Quraysh would simply not allow it. They won't allow that anyone migrates from them to a different country, to a different locality, and enjoy the freedom of religion in that place. That irritated them. And so some of the early Muslims, such as Abu Salama and Salama. Now we know who Salama is. She is our mother, the mother of the believers, the wife of the Prophet ﷺ. Before she married the Prophet ﷺ, she was married to Abu Salama. And Abu Salama, he gathered all of his belongings, his wife, and he had one son. And they started to migrate. But we know Makkah is a very small town. We mentioned 800 to 1,000 people, roughly. Everyone knows each other. So the word got out that he is leaving. So they went to him and they said, "Where do you think you're leaving?" He said, "I'm a free man. I can go anywhere I want. I'm leaving to Yathrib." So they said, "Okay, you can go, but you cannot take your wife. You cannot take your wife and you cannot take your son. They belong to us." So Abu Salama, he was from the tribe of Makhzum. And so Abu Salama, he's from the tribe of Makhzum. So you could see why they would make such a big deal. Abu Jahl is also from that tribe. So he tells him, "You can go ahead and leave, but you cannot take your son and you cannot take your wife because they belong to us. They belong to that." That's how it is. At that time, in that type of a society, your children actually doesn't really belong to you. It belongs to the whole of the tribe. So if anything happens to your child, the whole village takes that responsibility. Now, we also have that concept, but that concept has shifted from the family and from the village, and it has shifted to the state. So when you have a child, it belongs to the state. That's why if you do certain things to your child, even though it's yours, the state will jump in. So you will have, for example, in Kelantan, a father who is giving away his daughter who has reached the age of puberty, but she's under the age of 18. He's giving her away, and the state comes in and says, "You cannot do that." And we have this I think all over the world. because we are moving away from that different society into a state-centric society. So whatever the state, whatever these corporate conglomerates and these big corporate entities say, that is what happens. I don't know about here, but in the US, if you do not send your child to school, you will be taken to jail. You'll be sent to jail. You must institutionalize your child. You must enroll him in a school. So some people have come up with creative ways, and they say he's homeschooled. So then the government comes back and says, okay, what's your proof that he's homeschooled? Then to tackle that, to counter that, then they will say, okay, now you have to buy textbooks from this corporate entity, from this company, in order for us to know that you have at least registered your child in this, even though you're teaching him at home. So whatever they can, this is how they are trying to control our lives. This is what they're doing. So at that time, you have the village, you have now the tribe coming in. Who are you to take away our son? Meaning he's not your son, he is the son of the tribe. He's the son of the tribe. And that's why we find, this is why we can understand why it is so hard for them to kill the Prophet ﷺ, because they can't. There's just so much politics in there. Whereas now, we don't have that. If the government wants, he can just go ahead and kill that individual. That's it. Which tribe is going to get up and take your revenge? No one. No one. So you find this. So they took that away, and Salama for the next 16 months, 1.5 years, she's stuck in Medina until finally she's allowed to go back. She's allowed to go back to Medina and migrate there. And subhanAllah, who helps her? A man by the name of Uthman ibn Talha. Uthman ibn Talha. He's the one that sees her in the outskirts of Medina of Makkah, because she is migrating. He finds her near Masjid Tan'im. You guys know where Masjid Tan'im is? It's also called Masjid Aisha. So by the time she gets there, Uthman ibn Talha, okay, he's not a Muslim at that time. He sees her all alone, and he sees her walking in the middle of the desert with no mode of transportation. And he asks her, where are you going? What are you doing? And she says, I'm going to Yathrib. So he says, no, I will take you. And he walked the entire way from Makkah to Medina, and he didn't even say a word. Whenever they stopped to rest, he would leave her, walk away, sleep, let her take her rest somewhere else, and then proceed during that travel. And that shows his noble character. And in fact, Salama, she said, I do not know a more noble man than Uthman ibn Talha. So he walked for 2 weeks. That's about 2 weeks of journey from Makkah to Medina. But he goes, and once he drops her off at Medina, he comes back. That is, you have someone whose car breaks down. You're driving anyway. Do you think anyone is going to stop? We have completely lost this. He goes out of his way. He's coming into Medina probably from a different trip. And he makes the exact opposite, a complete U-turn. And he's not a Muslim, but he knows she is. And he does that. And this noble act is repaid to him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When the Prophet ﷺ, he conquers Makkah, the Prophet ﷺ is handing out different prizes, I guess you could say, different tasks, different honorship to the different people of Makkah. So he is handing out these big honorship. Like for example, he's handing out who will have the right of siqaya, which is to feed and water the pilgrims, to feed the pilgrims and give them water. And who was given that? Of course, it was Abbas, his uncle, because that has always been in the lineage or in the Banu Hashim. His great grandfathers took that upon him. So the Prophet ﷺ, he continued that within his lineage. And then he asks for the key. He says, give me the keys as well. And at this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he revealed the verses. Allah commands you to give the amana, the trust, to those who deserve it. So the Prophet ﷺ gave the key to Ali ibn Abi Talib and said, give this to Uthman ibn Talha, and it shall be with him and his descendants until the day of judgment. When he gave it to Uthman, he said, I thought you guys, meaning Banu Hashim, were going to keep it. But Ali said, Allah revealed this verse in the Quran that we need to give it to you. Can you believe it? Even up until this day, the descendants of Uthman ibn Talha have the keys, and the king of Saudi Arabia has to take permission from him in order for him to be allowed to open and pray inside. Any dignitary that goes. Who goes to open the doors of the Kaaba? It is the descendants of Uthman ibn Talha. That is an honor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to him. And such an honor, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives honor to people who are the seekers of honor. The Kaaba is pure. It is sacred. And Uthman, he kept himself pure. And he kept the sanctity of Salama. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he blessed him and his descendants. Even though he was not a Muslim, he became a Muslim at the conquest of Makkah. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't give it to someone who was from the early Muslims and said, because you helped me in Islam. No, he gave that to him. And that was because he helped Salama to migrate. Now imagine what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do to you and to your lineage. If you were to help someone in need, maybe someone is migrating to your country because they are fearing persecution in their lands, and you help them. What do you think Allah is going to do to you? Don't you think Allah, he's going to honor you in some way? In a way that not even you will ever recognize? If you don't see that fruits, your generations will. We've all heard the recent crackdown on these, these migrants, these poor muhajirin that have come here and sought refuge, fleeing their lands to protect their religion and their life. And how they were rounded up and now they're being deported. Now the same can be true. What kind of dishonor will Allah give you when you do that to those who have migrated? Because when you do something that is noble, Allah will give you and make you honorable. When you do something opposite, don't you think the same consequence, the opposite consequences is going to apply? You know, beneath, down near my condominium, there's a small little like a business, a whole bunch of business areas, like you know, those shop plots. And subhanAllah, there's this one Rohingyan woman with her infant, maybe a few months old baby, and another child, maybe 6 years old. I wouldn't be surprised if he's 10, right? But because he's still, and subhanAllah, I see them with whatever belongings that they had over there, spending nights. At first I thought, okay, these are probably selling some stuff on the roadside. And when I went to move my car from the main street, because now they started to give tickets, compounds, to the, because you can only park inside, you pay them and you park inside. So as I was doing that, I found them. I said, from last night, subhanAllah, what are they doing? I tried to communicate with them. And the owners and security guards of that place, they're trying to kick them out. So I, you know, intervened, and I told them, the security guard at that shift, his shift starts at 7 until 7 p.m. I told them, you know, Abang, don't do anything. They're Muslims. They're, you know, she has nowhere else to go. And I tried to plead with them, right? I don't know what happened to her husband. We don't know. But what can we do? What can we do? Every single one of us, we have a role to play. We have some sort. Use your imagination. Use your creativity. Imagine if that was you and your child. Because something happened in your country. And the only reason you are fleeing is because those people are killing you because you are a Muslim. Nothing else. And we know what the Buddhist terrorists and extremists are doing. They're doing it in the name of their religion. They're doing it. They said these Muslims, they're multiplying and they're going to take over. We have to kill them. They're killing them because they are Muslims. That's it. No other reason. So you have this non-Muslim, Uthman ibn Talha, full of honor, helping this person whom he knows has accepted Islam and he is not yet a Muslim. But he helps her. And Allah honors him and his descendants until the Day of Judgment with the keys of the Kaaba. No one, not even the king, any king, and there were many kings that came, and some of them were the worst. Many rulers ruled over Makkah. Some of them, like Hajjaj bin Yusuf, who catapulted Makkah and even destroyed some parts of the Kaaba because he wanted to conquer it from the Muslims who rebelled against the Umayyad dynasty. Even he could not take away the keys. You know, you have physical force, you have physical strength, you have military strength and force, but there's a strength that no one can match, and that is the power of the will and the qadr and the honor of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we find This is how the Prophet ﷺ or Islam and Allah honored him. Now there were other people that also migrated, such as Suhaib al-Rumi. Now he was a freed slave, and he was a very wealthy man too. Once he became free, he became a very successful businessman. And he was someone who was not a Qurayshi, but he lived in Makkah. So when he started to pack up and leave, right, the Quraysh will not allow him. Why? Because they are like, when he leaves, he's going to take all this wealth. So they go and start to chase him until they catch up with him. And he tells them, he said, "Oh people, you guys know I'm the best arrowman from amongst you, the best archer. I will not leave a single arrow in my quiver except that I have shot except that I have shot you guys with it. And then I'm going to fight with my sword until it bends or it breaks due to me hitting you guys with it. But if you guys want, I have wealth hidden. I have wealth hidden in Makkah, and I will tell you where it is if you allow me to migrate. If you allow me to migrate." So the Prophet ﷺ, so Suhaib, when he makes that offer, they agree to it, and he shows them where. But they are so greedy that they even wanted his camel. So he gave them his camel as well. And after giving that, he literally had nothing on his back or with him except the clothes on his back. And he was considered, or he was known, or he was the only Sahabi that we know of who made hijrah on foot. And after being the richest person, he was literally penniless. And he was crawling on all fours by the time he got to Quba, where he met the Prophet ﷺ, and he nearly collapsed. And the Prophet ﷺ himself went to him. He wiped off the dust from him, gave him food, gave him water, and he said, "Your business transaction has been the most successful." So without Suhaib even telling him what happened. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he revealed in the Quran chapter 2 verse 207, "And of mankind is he who would sell himself seeking the pleasure of Allah, and Allah is full of kindness to his slaves." Now there's another person who also migrated, but his migration was not your typical migration, and that was Umar radiallahu anhu. Umar, when he decided to migrate, he wanted to migrate with two of his friends, two Sahaba. Hisham ibn al-As, who was the brother of Amr ibn al-As. If you guys remember, Amr ibn al-As was the person who went to the king of Abyssinia to persuade him to give up and extradite the Muslims from Abyssinia back to Makkah. So his brother, Amr ibn al-As, his brother was Hisham ibn al-As. And so Hisham ibn al-As and Ayyash ibn Abi Rabi'a. Now these two people, Umar radiallahu anhu, he made a deal, and he said, "We're going to meet in a certain locality, in a certain place, and we are going to migrate, all three of us. So whoever is there at this time, at the break of dawn, we will go. And if you're not there, then that person is going to be left behind." So when the time came, the day and the dawn of break came, Hisham did not show up. So Ayyash and Umar migrated to Medina. And by the time they got there, Abu Jahl and his brother, now Ayyash, he was the half brother of Abu Jahl. Okay? So Abu Jahl and his other brother, who were both half brothers of Ayyash, they traveled all the way to Medina just to get Ayyash back. And they said to Ayyash, don't you know what you have done? Do you know what is the state of our mother after you've left? She won't eat, she won't drink, and she made a promise, she took an oath that she will sit in the sun and not seek any shade until she sees you. And we know what that does, right? No food, no drink. And sitting in the hot, scorching sun with no shade, dehydration, sunstroke, starvation, and the list goes on. They are doing this emotional blackmail that, look, because of you, you became a Muslim, you migrated, this is what you have put our mother through. So they are using emotional blackmail. This is not something new. We've seen that. We've seen that with one other Sahabi, if you guys remember. We've seen this emotional blackmail. I'm going to assign this as a second. This is more like a review, actually. Who was the first one that we talked about? Right? Some of you who just recently joined us, it's not too far back. He accepted Islam, and his mom used the same emotional thing. And he said, "Oh, mom, I love you, but if you want to eat, go ahead eat. If you don't want to eat, that's up to you. If you don't want to, but I'm not leaving this religion." And so his mother, when she saw and realized his resolve and his determination, she started eating and drinking again. So mention to me the name of that first person that we know of. Maybe there were others, but we covered this, and it's probably mentioned in those Seerah books that I think it's mentioned there. It should be. So when they tried to do this emotional blackmail, he decided to go with them. So Umar radiallahu anhu, he said, they are tricking you. Ayyash, if she's hungry, she can eat food. If she is thirsty, she can drink water. If she has lice, she will shave her hair off. If she's not getting any shade, she can just move from the sun. They are tricking you. But Ayyash insisted and said, no, it's my mother, I will go back. Sort her affairs out and then come back. And I have some money to collect as well, and I'll be in a better position. So Umar radiallahu anh said, if it's money, I will give it to you. So don't go. If it's your mother, she will deal with herself. But Abu Jahl kept on insisting, so Ayyash's heart basically gave in and he went back. But before he went, Umar radiallahu anh, he still knew that they were tricking him. And so he told Ayyash, take my camel, for it is faster and stronger. And there's another reason that Umar, he gave this to him. He said, take my camel, for if anything is happening to you, you can remember me by that camel. What does that mean? That means if you're getting swayed, when you look at my camel, you will remember that we are Muslims, and you will remember me, and you will remember the hijrah. So he said, anyway, go take my camel, for it's faster and stronger. And if you fear that they are going to backstab you, then you have my camel, come back and ride it back and come back to me right away. So Umar radiallahu anhu, he is really going above and beyond. Why? Because Umar is someone that can recognize trickery of people. He can see it. And so he's trying to help Ayash out because he also feels a sense of love for him. They were buddies in Makkah, they were friends, and now they are brothers in Islam, and now they are travel companions. You know, when you become a travel companion, two things are going to happen to you. Either you grow very close to that individual, or you're going to really hate that person. There's no third. If you've ever traveled with someone, right? Either you grow in your relationship with him, or you say, I have truly understood, or I have truly discovered who this person is. And that's how you could understand this is one of the three ways, or one of the four ways. Some people say three, some people say four ways you could find out the true characteristic of someone. One of them is through travel. Maybe you've gone with Hajj. This person is the nicest guy in the world with you when he's in the house, when he's at your house, when you guys are together. But when you go for Hajj, his real thing comes out. He starts saying things and doing things and being arrogant and being this, and you're like, I have never seen this. Things don't go right. Everyone is frustrated. He's the most frustrated. Or your neighbor. You truly know, okay, this person, he's not really who he is, because he's not very neighborly, very rude, leaves the trash out, the kids are yelling, he doesn't care, he leaves the door open, all this smell from his house comes in, he doesn't, I mean, the list goes on. Okay? And business, when you do business with someone, their true colors come out. And some scholars said when you marry someone, then before they're so nice and they are, but then when you marry someone, then their true identity comes out. So so you see that Umar radiallahu anhu, they were friends in Makkah, and now even brothers in Islam, and now even travel companions. Now everyone migrated secretly, except for Umar radiallahu anhu. When he was leaving to meet Ayash and Hisham in that place, he did that openly. Okay? And because he knows that Ayash and Hisham, they cannot do that openly. That they cannot go out openly with him and migrate. So he said, all right, we are going to meet in such and such place. How you get there, that is up to you. So Umar radiallahu anh, he chose to publicly announce, everyone, so far we've mentioned, secretly. And they are basically giving away everything that they've had. Their secret treasures that they have buried underground, they're giving that away. No one knows of it. But they're making that bargain with the people. Umar radiallahu anhu, he doesn't do that. He's the one who does it publicly. But not publicly where he just packs up his bag and he leaves. He announces. And he arms himself. And he dresses as a traveler. He goes to the Kaaba. He makes tawaf 7 times. And then he says, O people of Makkah, whoever wishes that his mother loses him tonight, and that his children become orphans and his wife a widow, then know that I am doing I'm doing the hijrah, and you can meet me outside in this valley. That's Umar. You don't want to mess with Umar radiallahu anhu. Even Shaitan was afraid of him. So he said, meet me there. And this shows you his status, both of, you know, his iman, his physical strength, his mental strength. He's not going to let some of these mushrikeen whom he sees as inferior to him, he's not going to allow them to put him down and get in the way of him fulfilling one of the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we also know how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he asked Allah to bless Islam with one of the two Umars, whether it was Abu Jahl, or whether it was Umar ibn Khattab or Umar ibn Hisham, which was Abu Jahl. So Umar radiallahu anhu, that's how he made the hijrah. Now, there's a hadith about Aisha radiallahu anhu in which she says that I don't remember any day except my parents were Muslims. And what that means is that even before she was born, she's about what, 7 years old at this point when the Prophet ﷺ is trying to perform the hijrah, 7, 8 years old. So she's saying that I do not know of any day except that my parents were Muslims, which means that she was born into a family that were already Muslims. So she was born when Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was a Muslim. And she said that the Prophet ﷺ was, when the Prophet ﷺ was given permission to migrate, he told the Muslims to migrate, and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu prepared a camel to migrate. And so he asked the Prophet ﷺ for permission. And that tells us that no one migrated except that they asked for permission from the Prophet ﷺ. So the Prophet ﷺ told Abu Bakr, wait, I hope that Allah will give us permission. And so Abu Bakr understood that the Prophet ﷺ wanted permission to migrate with him. So he asked, are you hoping for my companionship? The Prophet ﷺ said yes. And this shows us that the Prophet ﷺ, again, he never did anything except by the permission and the commandment of Allah. So when Abu Bakr, he heard this, he started preparing 2 camels. And I've mentioned somewhere here that he started giving them special leaves, right? And these leaves were, I think, acacia leaves. And that tells you, right here. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he's preparing 2 fast camels, and he's feeding them these special leaves, which is given to these camels in order to make them prepare for a very long journey. And it tells us again how the Prophet ﷺ, he took, and Abu Bakr, they took worldly means, and they took it, but they never depended on them. They depended on Allah. We always have 2 extremes. We have the extreme who only take the worldly means and they could care less about depending on Allah, and we have the other extreme that only depends on Allah and they don't take any worldly means. Now over here, they both were waiting, and they knew Allah is going to give them permission soon. So they did not have anything to fear, but they were going ahead to prepare. A lot of the people that try to migrate to a Muslim country, they do so without any preparation. And they find themselves in a situation where they are worse off, both religiously and financially, than they were if they were to stay in their country, in the non-Muslim country. So over here, the Prophet ﷺ, he is waiting for the commandment of Allah to take place, and it finally does after a few weeks. And Aisha radiallahu anhu, she says that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he came to our house. He asked for permission, and he was granted. He was brought inside, and he asked that everyone be removed from all the rooms. So Abu Bakr, he said, there is no one except your family, meaning Aisha and her mother. There's only, because Aisha was already given in marriage to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but it was not consummated until it was when they migrated, when Aisha migrated, and we will find out who did Aisha migrate with. So Aisha had already married the Prophet. The Prophet ﷺ already had married, or what you could say was engaged to Aisha radiallahu anha, and there was a waiting period of 3 years. Okay? And the feminists are not going to like this very much, right? This is one of the very, very contentious topic, to the point where now you have these female, or rather these male feminists. I don't know what that is called. Before we used to call them transsexual, but now they're called, anyway, or hermaphrodites. Now these male feminists, these Islamic, so-called Islamic scholars who are acting for the interests of feminists, they have come out with articles. Maybe I will show you one. That how her age was actually not 9 when she married, it was actually 18. I started laughing, but I knew this. The first time I read that article, no, sorry, not that article. The first time I heard this, or the first time I read this debate, was maybe about 20 years ago. And even at that time, I found it a bit weird. I say, okay, alhamdulillah, it's knowledge, right? But when you are using a certain aspect of knowledge to go ahead for a specific agenda, then that is, for me, that is not very sincere. You guys understand? Like, we understand that there is this other side which says that she was actually 18. Good, alhamdulillah. Me as a teacher, I will go ahead and mention that to you guys. That, you know, there is one that says 9, the other says that she was 18, and these are. But then when I'm using it in order for me to cater to a specific group, then that is very insincere. That is not sincerity in dispensing knowledge. That means you are already biased in your research. If you are a think tank, you cannot be biased. You have an agenda. You need to state the facts. And stating the facts in footnotes is not doing justice to it. So there's a whole bunch of Islamic personalities who are actually going around and saying, no, she was actually 18. Well, what a very convenient age, right? Especially now that the legal age is 18. But what happens if there's a research, and I'm sure there is, that says, you know what, she wasn't 18 and that's it, she was 9. What are you going to do? Is your iman going to shake? Are you going to lose your iman? It shouldn't be such a big issue. I don't know why we have to talk about it and even cater to that. How old was Maryam alayhi salam when she had baby Prophet Jesus alayhi salam? I think she was about 8, 7, 10 years old. Okay? You don't see the Christians saying, well, no, actually, she was 20. You don't see them saying that. So why we Muslims have to do that? The Prophet ﷺ, anyway, I just don't want to go into that. But the point is, the Prophet Aisha, she's 6, 7 years old, most likely 7, 8 years old, because when she travels after a few months to Medina, she migrates. She turns 9, and that's where the Prophet ﷺ consummates the marriage. So Abu Bakr, he's preparing his animals, and he tells the Prophet, he said, "O Prophet of Allah," because the Prophet tells him, he says, "I have been given the order to migrate." So Abu Bakr, he asks, he says, "Did Allah allow me to be your companion?" And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Yes." And Abu Bakr, he starts to cry. And Aisha says, "I never believed people could cry out of happiness until that day." So you could see, how young she was and how very innocent she was. She said, "I never believed that people could cry out of happiness until that day when I saw Abu Bakr crying." So Abu Bakr said, "I prepared 2 camels. One of them is for you." And the Prophet ﷺ didn't even have, so this tells you he didn't even have a camel. Right? And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Only if I pay you the cost of a camel." Why? Why do you think the Prophet ﷺ, wouldn't he accept a gift? Yeah, of course he would. But there are certain occasions where you do not want to deprive yourself of gaining the reward. And over here, the Prophet ﷺ wants to be full, he wants to gain the full reward of doing the hijrah. So he says, the camel, I'm going to pay for it because I want to get the full reward of the hijrah. So Abu Bakr, he reluctantly, forcibly takes the money from the Prophet ﷺ. And so there, Aisha and Asma, both of them are half sisters. They have a different mother, but the same father. Asma, she's 15 years older than Aisha. Aisha, she's only about 7 or 8. And Asma, she's much older than her, almost double her age. And so they both are preparing, their food. And so they have put all of that in a bag, and they tied that into a bundle. And so Asma, she takes off her belt, she bites it in half, and uses that to hold the food. And that is why she is called the one with the 2 belts. So if you've ever heard that in the hadith, Asma radiallahu anha, the mother or the one with the 2 belts, you would know where that comes from. This is why I'm mentioning it. And Abu Bakr, he gathers his coins, his cash, and it is only 5,000 dirhams, silver coins. But when we look at how much he had before Islam, it was 40,000. And now his wealth he spent 90% of his wealth for Islam. So do you understand how the Prophet ﷺ said, "I can pay everyone except Abu Bakr"? I can repay everyone. I can repay all the good that people have done to me except Abu Bakr. What happened to the 90%? What happened to the 35,000 dirhams? It was spent in helping the Prophet ﷺ. It was spent in freeing slaves, buying them and freeing them. All right. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he goes and he makes that preparation, and they go ahead and are preparing to make the journey in a few hours' time. But there was something that was going on, and that was a secret meeting at the Darun Nadwa. Darun Nadwa. Remember, we mentioned that a Nadwa was where they all used to come and they all used to have a council, a meeting over there. So they all came in secret. All the representatives of all the tribes of Quraysh, they came, except for two people. And that was Abu Lahab and Mut'im ibn Adi. Who was Mut'im ibn Adi? Remember when the Prophet ﷺ was coming back from Ta'if? He was seeking protection. So he sent out a letter to each tribe of the Quraysh, and they all refused except for Mut'im ibn Adi. Even though he died a non-Muslim. He died a non-Muslim. And we will remember this name, Mut'im ibn Adi, because when the battle of Badr comes, you will see the true nature, not the true nature, but you would see, like, I don't want to define the true nature of the Prophet by just one incident. You know, that would be restricting him. That would be like really limiting him as if he didn't have a true nature. So that's a wrong word for me to use or description. But you would find the nature of the Prophet. So let me just leave it in general. You will find how loyal the Prophet ﷺ, and and that was one occasion where it manifested itself. So remember this name, Mut'im ibn Adi. We will mention him one last time in the battle of Badr. So if I forget, just remind me to mention him. I may not have it in my notes. So they did not bring these two. Why? Because Mut'im ibn Adi had given protection to the Prophet ﷺ, and Abu Lahab was his kinsman. No matter how much he hated him, nonetheless, it was still his nephew. So they had this council, and it was also attended by Shaitan, or rather I should say Iblis. So Iblis had also disguised himself as an old man, and people recognized him as the old man known as Sheikh Jalil. Literally, that is what some of the biographies said, that he was known as Sheikh Jalil, which means an old man by the name of Jalil. So he said that I am the leader from Najd. Allow me to come, perhaps I can benefit you about what you are planning to do. So they all came and they started saying, look, the Muslims are now all migrating, and we cannot let this happen, because if we let him migrate, he's going to become more powerful and he's going to be a threat. So the whole meeting is about the Quraysh being enraged at the Muslims migrating, and now even the possibility of the Prophet. So they are saying, what should we do? So they said that let's imprison him. Let's put him in a dungeon. Let's put him in a house. And they said, let us imprison him until he dies. So they said, so Iblis, he said to them, he said, sending him or imprisoning him, his words will still reach his followers. So if you imprison him, he can still write letters, he can still send out messages, and who knows what they will do. They will all eventually gather to free him. And they say, let's drive him out and exile him. So Iblis said, sending him into exile is to send him back to his followers. It will strengthen them. So Abu Jahl said, Well, what should we do? Right? He's telling the people, look, you guys are still not talking about the main point, which everyone is thinking, but no one has the guts to say it. Let's just kill him. But the problem is, it's a matter of law and honor. So the law says that if anyone kills him, he has to be killed. So no one wants to take that. And the law says you never kill your own people. Otherwise, the whole Arabian Peninsula will be talking bad about Quraysh. And they say these are one of the most disgusting and one of the most honorless people with no honor, no dignity, that they go ahead and kill one of their own. So how to go about doing that? So Abu Jahl, he comes out with this solution. He says, let me go ahead and make this. He says, select strong and smart, noble youth from every tribe to kill him. That way, when it comes to law, the Banu Hashim cannot kill all of these young people from every tribe, because we're not going to allow it. And if we're not going to allow it, they cannot overpower all of the tribes of Quraysh, because we are 12 tribes, they are only one. We're 11, they're only one, so a total of 12. It's 12 against 1. So they will be forced to accept blood money. And in terms of honor, no one can talk bad about any one tribe, because all of these 11 people participated in killing him. So who are they going to talk bad about? Are they going to say this tribe, but then that tribe say, no, we didn't kill him. We all participated. So no one will be specifically blamed. And if they're all going to be blamed, well, we're in it together. But not one tribe at the exclusion of another is going to be blamed. And they had this very strong sense of honor. However dishonorable they were. So after Abu Jahl said this, Iblis stood up and said, this is the right decision. You see, he can't, this is how weak Iblis is. You guys, this is just another example. He can't even give them a suggestion. Forget about making them do it, you know? He can't even give them a suggestion. Which tells you Abu Jahl is just like Iblis, or probably a bigger genius than Iblis. Right? He comes out, and that's why we find some people from amongst humans that they are shaitan 100%. Even sometimes worse than shaitan. Even shaitan says, I could not even come up with this. So not every single thing comes from shaitan. Yes, he does lay some of the framework, you know. He gives ideas maybe, but a human's intellect is far, far greater than a jinn's intellect. And I mentioned earlier in this class that the shayateen, they're so limited in creativity that they only use the same tactics for thousands, hundreds, tens of thousands of years to deceive people. It works all the time. Yeah, don't get me wrong. It works all the time. It's the same tactics. That's why he's using them. So he's not very technologically advanced. Because he knows these things work throughout time. He's tried it. He's tested it. And so he's smart about it. But he's not very smart. He couldn't even come up with a suggestion. And you have Abu Jahl, That's why this is a side note. Humans are far superior than any, or rather, let me say, uh, Allah has created humans far superior than any of His creation when it comes to intellect. When it comes to intellect, if we use this intellect in the obedience of Allah, then we can be the best creation. If we don't, then follow along with me. You have animals who have greater eyesight than you. So what advantage do you have over them? Nothing. You have animals who are stronger than you. So what advantage do you have over them? Nothing. You have animals who are faster than you. You have animals who are bigger, heavier, everything, have a better hearing capacity at much lower decibels than they can hear. Animals who have more eyes than you, like a bug has what? Hundreds of eyes. You know, just a regular bug. There are animals who can see infrared rays. There are animals who can see UV rays. Right? Like, for example, the dogs and the donkeys, they can see UV rays. Whereas roosters and those kinds of animals, they can see into the infrared rays. Whereas we can only see the visible rays, or what we call the visible rays. So why or how are you better? These animals by far seems to be much better, right? There are animals that can fly, you can't fly. There are animals have more kids than you. Okay? Every single animal is the owner of a house. Did you guys know that? Or at least the ones that are married. Because or at least the ones that are mating and have a family. Because you cannot have a family if you do not have a house, a nest, land, a sanctuary. It's just not gonna happen. Of course, I'm not talking about except the ones that are like imprisoned or like set in a cage or something. They don't have a choice. Actually, even those birds that you put in a cage, even then they will not mate until you create a house, a nest for them. Very interesting. You guys should read into it so your iman can really increase. And you see that. So you could say, which one of us is the owner of a house before we get married? By the way, they own that before they get married, and then they invite their mates, the female mates. Come, look, I have a house. Watch YouTube videos on these birds of what they call the birds of paradise. Much the way they attract and the way they dance for them, and then the way they do all of these things. In order to Google that. Yet we are saying that we are better in what regards? And that's why Allah, He says that those who do not follow the religion of Islam, those who are not Muslim, they are worse than animals. And it makes sense that these people are worse than animals because the animals are better in every regards to them. The one thing that they were better, yet they did not use it to recognize Allah, and that was the intellect. That is what allows us, that is what allows us to be differentiated and be the best. Our intellect, use it. You can even teach animals to memorize Surah Fatiha. And the whole Salah doesn't really make your, we are really not that better except for our intellect. So you have Abu Jahl saying this, right? And he's the worst amongst the worst. He's actually the Fir'aun of the Fir'aun of this ummah. So Iblis, he says, this is the right decision. So right there and then, all the tribes picked one person and they sent them all to the house of the Prophet ﷺ. Where was the house of the Prophet? The house of the Prophet was the house of Khadijah. Who lived in there? Well, it was the Prophet ﷺ, it was Zayd, it was his Ali radiallahu anhu. Remember, Ali, he lived with the Prophet ﷺ from a young age. So the Prophet, so Jibreel, he came to the Prophet and he says, you need to leave now. Make hijrah now. And the same evening, the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr, they left the house. And so we have famous reports, right? They don't have any isnad, any chain for them, that the Prophet ﷺ, as he was being surrounded, the Prophet ﷺ, he walked out and he was reciting Surah Yasin, and they were completely blinded to his presence. They couldn't see a thing, and he threw dust in the direction of the people that were surrounding his house. So we have all of these famous reports, but all of these reports, they really don't have a sanad, a chain. So as they are making their travel, which way do you think the Prophet ﷺ migrated towards? Okay. How do you think the Prophet ﷺ? You think he went north straight away to Medina? No, he headed south. And this is probably the best map I could find of the Prophet ﷺ's migration. Right? So this is Makkah, this yellow right here. That's Medina. And so the Prophet, he went south to a place where it's called Jabal Thawr, or Ghar Thawr, which is the cave of Thawr. That was the name of the mountain. So he went, and that was the plan. We are going to go south, and we are going to stay in that mountain, because they knew that they're going to be looking for him for the next few days. And they also knew that they're going to look for him up north. So let's go ahead and go down south. And the way he went, right? So they stayed there for 3 days and 3 nights. And he took, look, again, Abu Bakr, they took precautionary measures. They didn't tell anyone except their own family. And they told Abdullah ibn Urayqit that, look, I want you to bring me food. Or they told Abdullah, his son, every day bring food and water, and also bring news from the Quraysh. What are they planning? What are they talking about? Where are they sending their people to search for us? And he told Abdullah ibn Urayqit, the third person, he said, take some of your sheep and your goats. Anytime my son, he comes to me, I want you to follow him, so to erase the tracks and the footprints. So that way, those trackers, the people that track others, they would be confused. Like, okay, these are just animal prints. So they stay there for 3 days and night. And I want you, before we finish off, this is the route that the Prophet, this green one, was the route the Prophet ﷺ took. The normal way, because eventually he has to go up north. The normal route is this orange or this pink one. Okay, this is the normal highway that that the people of Quraysh would take. This is the normal highway. Why do I call it a highway? Because it has rest areas. It has wells along the way. People have developed, right? This is something that people would take, the caravans. It was secured. So this is the way that they would take, okay? Like this. Yet the Prophet ﷺ, when he goes south first, and then as he's making his way up north, he's not going to follow this. He's going to do the exact opposite. And that's why you see this looping going around. Do you guys see that? He's looping around. And he's only intersecting at these junctions to pick up more water. Okay? Or he's doing that because now, so he's going this way. Now, when he knows that the road is going to meet and now it's going to follow his direction, he goes and he switches that. Okay? And then when he realizes that they're going to switch this way, he switches it and goes that way. So that way, they won't. If they're looking for him, they're going to be looking for him in the obvious, you know, in the most obvious of places. So they go up north, they can't find anyone. They put a bounty of 100 camels. That's a lot of wealth. That's a lot of money. 100 camels. So everyone is on the lookout. And where do you think these people are looking for? They even hire a tracker, a person who tracks. And that person was so smart that he found where he was. And that was the Jabal Thawr. But then when he looks, there's nothing. It just ends. He says, this is where it leads. They should be here. So they climb the mountain, right? And they can't find them. And we have those famous traditions where the spider, you know, it weaves its web. And also there's two pigeons who also make their nest. And there's another one as well. We have those famous traditions, but the most authentic one, of course, is the spider, that he made a web at the entrance so as to make it appear that, look, no one is here, that no one came this way. So why should we even, like, if they had come, then that means the spider web would not be there. And that is probably this is the one that's the most authentic. The other ones people made up later on, right? The tree was leaning to give them shade, and also to so that way, you know, people will not think that there's anyone there. And you see Abu Bakr being very, very nervous. They spent 3 days. Every day his son comes, gives him food, gives him the news, and then he leaves back. Abdullah ibn Urayqit, he goes and he wipes over with his animals all of the footprints of his son Abdullah. All right. So their guide is taking them around like this. And since the word has gone out that there's 100 camels, whoever brings Muhammad, dead or alive, everyone is searching. One of the people is Suraqa ibn Malik. Remember this name? Suraqa ibn Malik, he's not from the Quraysh, but he hears this news. Everyone knows about this news. And so one day he's sitting with his friends in the tent. And one of the people came and he said, I saw 3 people, because the news is that there's 3 people, the guide, Abdullah ibn Urayqit, Abu Bakr, and the Prophet ﷺ, that they're looking for these 3 people. So this one person, he comes to the tribe, he comes to Suraqa ibn Malik, he says, I saw three people taking a road that normally no one takes. And I think it may be those three people. So Suraqa ibn Malik, when he hears this, he gets a bit greedy. So he says, because he wants that 100 camels for himself. So he says, oh, those people, I've already asked who they are. They're no one. It's not them. I've already sent my people there. And they checked them out. So he uses this trickery against this. Why? Because he wants this 100 camels for himself. So as soon as the guy is like, oh, okay, all right, since you sent your people and they already checked that out, then never mind. So everyone settles, and after a while, they all leave. So Soraka, he sets out, he prepares himself, he wears his armor, gets his sword, gets his arrow, and he sets out in that direction where the person told him. He goes up, finally, he catches up to them, and as he's about to get more and more close, the feet of his horses sink into the ground, and he is flipped over his horse. So finally he shakes everything off, he gets back on his horse, and he goes on it again. When he gets close again, the same thing happens. And then the third time again. And that is when he realizes, because these people, they had superstitious beliefs, right? These people, they had superstitious beliefs that this must be a sign that I can't. So he found out that I cannot harm this person. I cannot get close to this person. So I have to change my intention, because it looks like this person he has this power behind him which is preventing me. So he changes and he goes and he yells, as he's getting more closer, but before, for the fourth time, he yells out to the person. He says, "O people, I come in peace. I mean no harm. I just want to talk to you." So he goes and he asks for a letter of what we call a letter of peace, which means that if you guys ever are in a position of power, then do not harm me. And if I'm ever in a position of power, then I'm not going to harm you guys. And subhanAllah, just 5 minutes ago, he was ready to harm this person, the Prophet ﷺ, and the two people. But now all of a sudden he is completely changing. So the Prophet ﷺ, he has that letter, or that letter drawn up for him, that he is going to be given security, that if we are ever in a protection, if we are ever in the position of power, he is going to be protected. So he seeks that protection from him. And so when he is given that, as he is living, the Prophet ﷺ, he tells Soraka, he said, "Oh Soraka," he said, he says, "Oh Soraka, how will you be the day that you put the bracelets of Kisra, that you wear the bracelets of Kisra?" What does that mean? He said, "What a nice day. How are you going to be? Meaning you are going to have you are going to be given the bracelets, or some narration says the robe of Kisra, the Sassanid Empire." And we mentioned they were the superpower at the time. And Soraka was so shocked that here he is hunting and trying to capture the Prophet ﷺ, but he finds himself hearing such an optimistic tone from the Prophet, full of iman and full of belief in optimism, that he is being exiled, but now he is thinking so high and so big that he's giving him the tidings, the glad tidings that, look, we are going to be in such a position that you are going to be wearing the bracelets of Kisra. And sure enough, after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, 7 years, 8 years after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, the Sassanid Empire collapsed in the time of Umar, and all of the treasures was gathered and sent to Umar in Medina, and now the masjid is full of gold, and everyone knows about this hadith. Abu Bakr knows, he tells this to others. So everyone knows. Some of them, of course, the senior Sahaba know, not the junior and not the non-Sahaba. And so Umar, he calls Soraka. He says, "Oh, Soraka, come." He makes him sit on the pulpit of the masjid, and he makes him wear the bracelet of Kisra, or the robe of Kisra, and he puts them on him. And the entire congregation and the Muslims, they start to say Allahu Akbar, and they praise Allah. And Umar radiallahu anhu, he praises Allah, and he makes Soraka go around Medina with these bracelets, showing off to the rest of Medina, look, this is the promise that the Prophet gave to Soraka when he was chasing him, while he was chased out of Makkah. So it is reliving those memories of the Hijrah and making and putting into the hearts of the people. That was like a practical seerah. Wouldn't it have been, yani, how nice? They were learning the seerah through a practical way, through living it. Like that was actually it. So it was showing to the people some of the prophecies as it was coming true. So he made him go around Medina with that robe or those bracelets on him. And we know those Persian kings, how they had like all, you know, necklaces, gold and ears, everything. Their whole, up until they would wear bracelets up until their shoulders. That's how much gold bracelets they would be wearing. So, and then Umar, he took it out from him. Soraka was like, the Prophet ﷺ said, it was mine. He said, no, the Prophet didn't say it was yours. He said, how nice would it be that you would wear it? He said, this belongs to the Muslims. It doesn't belong to you. He said, we have fulfilled that prophecy. That tells you the deep insight and understanding of Umar radiallahu anhu, that this wealth was not at the exclusion of the Muslim, that the Prophet did not promise Soraka that he is going to own it and that it is his. He said, how nice would it be that you would be made to wear it, and that's it. So Soraka, he took everything off. He had that moment, right? He fulfilled that prophecy. He took everything off and he put it back, and Umar, he put it into the Muslim treasury. And so we have this, and we will end with this. Inshallah, next week we will pick up from when the Prophet ﷺ, the journey, how he converted some people along the way until he reached, and we will pick up with that next week, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. رب اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين.